Ever since Sophia became my stepmother, the atmosphere in our home has become unpredictable. She always stares at me with an indescribable look, and her gaze and smile become deeper whenever my father is out. I try my best to ignore this feeling, but it is like an undercurrent surging inadvertently. Sophia is an elegant and charming woman, and her appearance has brought new vitality to my father's life. I was also happy for my father, but as time went on, I began to realize that my attention to Sophia went beyond normal family relationships. Her every move, every smile, seemed to touch my heart silently. It was a quiet night, and my father was away on a business trip, leaving Sophia and me at home. The house was so quiet that only the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the wooden floor could be heard. Sophia suggested watching a movie together, and I agreed, although I felt a little uneasy. We sat on the sofa and the movie started, but my attention was completely attracted by her presence. Her legs accidentally touched me, making my breath stagnate. As the movie progressed, Sophia leaned closer to me, her arm casually draped over the back of the sofa, her fingers gently caressing my neck. These small touches made my heart beat faster, and I tried to focus on the movie, but found that I couldn't ignore her presence at all. After the movie ended, Sophia turned around. Her eyes caught my gaze in the dim light, and she smiled softly, her lips slightly parted, enough to make my thoughts fly. "It's nice to be home alone, isn't it?" Her voice was low and soft. I nodded, afraid to speak, for fear of revealing the emotional storm inside. She moved closer again, this time facing me completely, her leg touching me intentionally or unintentionally, and she whispered, "You really have changed a lot." Her eyes swept over me, making my skin tingle. I almost didn't recognize the shy boy my father met when he married her. There was a heat in her eyes that was more than just ordinary conversation, but hinted at more. I swallow hard, my throat dry, the air thickening around me, filled with a tension I hadn't expected, but I can't resist. Sophia leans in closer, her lips near my ear, her warm breath against my skin. "I've been thinking about you." Her fingers run down my arm, leaving a trail of goosebumps. I turn to face her, my mind a mess, trying to comprehend what's happening, what I want to happen. But before I can say anything, she leans in, her lips pressing against mine, softly at first, tentatively, to see if I'll pull back. But I don't. I can't. The kiss deepens, her hands moving to my face, pulling me closer. I respond instinctively, my hands finding her waist, squeezing gently at first, then tighter and tighter as the tension between us builds. Her body presses against mine, intoxicating, and the kiss becomes more urgent, more eager. Her fingers tangled in my hair, and I can feel her soft moans vibrating against my lips. It was as if a dam had broken, and all the tension that had built up over the past few months burst forth in that moment. The outside world fell away, and it was just the two of us, entangled in each other's arms, our breaths coming fast and hot. Sophia pulled back slightly, enough to look me in the eye, her pupils dilated with desire. "You're already a man," she whispered, her voice thick with desire, and I felt a rush of excitement at her words, and then I realized she was kissing me again, more intensely this time. Her body pressed against mine, her hands exploring my chest, my shoulders, my back, and every touch was an electric shock, sparks of pleasure running through my body. I found myself lost in the moment, consumed by her, by the heat between us. Sophia's fingers slid down my breasts, lingering just long enough to make me shiver, and then slid under my shirt, which she pulled over my head in one fluid motion. Her hands immediately returned to my skin, tracing the contours of my muscles, exploring every inch. Her lips followed the path of her fingers, leaving a trail of fiery marks, and each kiss triggered new waves of heat in my body. I could barely think, couldn't breathe. All I knew was that I didn't want this to stop. Didn't want the distance between us to return. I wanted more, needed more, and she seemed to sense that, hooking her fingers around the waistband of my pants and pulling them down slowly, teasingly. All the while, her eyes locked on mine. I could see the desire in her eyes, a desire that burned just as much as mine. She was in control, and I was more than willing to let her lead. As time went on, the tension between us built. Our need for each other intensified to a fever pitch. She moved on top of me, her body pressed against mine, and for a moment we stayed that way, our breaths blending, our heartbeats syncing. It was as if the world had stopped and we were left alone, lost in each other. Her lips found mine again, this time for a slow, languid kiss, but no less passionate. It was a kiss that promised more, one that showed a desire that had been hidden for too long. Her hands roamed over my body, exploring every inch, every curve, as if she wanted to memorize how I felt. Time seemed to stretch. Each moment felt like an eternity. We were lost in each other. The outside world no longer mattered. Only the heat between us. How our bodies moved together. How her skin felt against mine. It all felt so all-consuming, overwhelming, and yet felt so right. Like we had always been meant to be here. We were both careful, moving slowly, savoring every touch, every kiss, dragging out this moment as long as we could. We both knew it was forbidden, couldn't last, but in that moment, we didn't care. The only thing that mattered was now, how we made each other feel, the tension finally finding its way to release. Each touch, each kiss was more intimate than the last, each bringing us closer to the edge but never quite taking us over. It was like we were dancing along that line, teasing it, pushing it, but never quite crossing it. The anticipation built with every moment, every breath, until it was almost unbearable, the need for each other almost palpable in the air. Her hands moved lower, her fingers drawing patterns on my skin, her lips following, kissing every inch of me, her breath warm and soft against my skin. The heat between us was intense, suffocating, in the best way possible. We were both lost in it, consumed by the need and desire that had been simmering just beneath the surface for so long. I wasn't prepared for any of this, but as her hands continued to explore my body, as her lips continued to kiss me, I realized that I didn't care. I didn't care what it meant, what the consequences were, beyond the feeling of her skin against mine, her body pressing against mine, her breathing quickening with every passing moment. We stayed like this for hours, entangled, our bodies moving in perfect harmony. We were both careful, cautious, enjoying every moment, delaying the inevitable as long as possible, prolonging the pleasure, prolonging the tension until it was almost unbearable. But we didn't stop. Neither of us wanted it to end. This was the night that would change everything, a night I would never forget, a night where boundaries were crossed, lines blurred, and nothing would ever be the same again. But in that moment, none of that mattered. All that existed was the warmth of her body, the quickening of her breath as my fingers brushed across her skin, the heat as our lips collided again. Every kiss felt like it had a deeper meaning. Every touch sent ripples of intensity through both of us. I could feel her heartbeat beating rapidly against my chest, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat as if they were in perfect sync. Her hands roamed more urgently over my body, her touches becoming bolder, her nails scratching across my skin as time went on, enough to make me shiver beneath her. Sophia's breath was hot on my neck, and I could feel the desire radiating from her with every slow, deliberate movement she made. She controlled us, guiding us through this uncharted territory, and her confidence took my breath away. She didn't speak. She shifted, straddling me, her body pressing tightly against mine, her eyes locked on mine. And for a moment, There was only silence between us. Only the sound of our heavy breathing filling the room. Her lips parted slightly, and she leaned down, her mouth just inches away from mine. "Do you want this?" she whispered, her voice low and sensual, almost teasing, as if she already knew the answer. I couldn't speak, couldn't form words. Instead, I nodded, and my hands found her waist, pulling her closer to me, needing to feel her, needing her, more than I'd ever needed anything in my life. The connection between us was undeniable, electric, every inch of her skin pressing against mine, sending shocks through my body, building tension, pushing both of us over the edge. Her lips met mine again, and this time, there was no hesitation. The kiss was intense, passionate, as if we were both craving each other, eager to explore the connection that had been built for so long. I moved my hands along her back, feeling the softness of her skin, and she arched her body, instinctively responding to my touch, slowly and deliberately, moving her fingers along my breasts, following the lines of my body with a delicate touch that turned me on. She was teasing me, enjoying every gasp and shudder she elicited from me. She knew how much power she had over me, and she wasn't rushing to end the moment, but slowly and deliberately, prolonging the tension until it was almost too much for both of us. Then, finally, when neither of us could stand the tension any longer, she guided both of us to the top. Our breaths and heartbeats merged in an explosion of passion. The room was filled with our moans and gasps, until finally, we both lay quietly on the couch, gasping for breath, trying to recover from the passion just now. At that moment, I knew that our lives would never be the same again. As time went on, our relationship became more complicated. We began to explore each other's world carefully, and every contact was full of taboos and passion. We were like playing a dangerous game, and every step was full of unknowns and adventures. We began to meet secretly when my father was not at home, and every gathering was like stolen sweetness, and every separation was full of reluctance and expectation.